Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Zaleski Sports Show. Jason Zaleski here alongside Steve Maves. Steve, haven't seen you in a while. It's been a few weeks, boy. And what we missed, you and I missed talking about last week, was NFL, Super Bowl, Chiefs over the 49ers. I gave my opinions last week, but we'll kick it over to Steve Maves here right away. Steve, any surprises in that Super Bowl for you?
Not really. I mean, the Chiefs, as they had the whole postseason, fell behind by quite a bit. Came back with Patrick Mahomes and company, and I just hats off to Andy Reid, a Packer guy in the early and mid '90s. Really good to see Andy Reid, his 222nd career win, getting the job done in Super Bowl 54 in Miami, and they're headed back to state of Florida next year, Super Bowl 55 in Tampa Bay. So should be a interesting offseason and see what we can expect the rest of the way.
I know that you and I watched the same amount of the XFL yesterday, and for me, I had it on in the background for a few minutes. Then golf came on, and I was like, all right, watch some golf here a little bit. And yeah, I don't know, just not able to get into the XFL.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, just a lot of, as I was listening on the way here, a lot of the same players were a part of the AAF that collapsed last year. Very interesting with the new rule changes and what they have, a part of the XFL being mic'd up, everybody just about being mic'd up, and it'll be interesting to see if the NFL takes any of those considerations, especially with the replay, where the replay official up in the booth is talking to the official on the field, give a little more clearance on the calls coming in from the booth.
Everybody squeezing every last drop out of football popularity in our country, and that's, to me, what this is. So best of luck. I need a break from it all, and if we have time later on the show, we'll talk about what I'm more interested in after the Super Bowl, which is college basketball. But in the meantime, playoffs, speaking of, Jim Mora, a really funny Jim Mora story. He famously, in a post-game presser where his Colts had lost, and he was asked about his team's chances for the playoffs. He said they're just trying to win a game. But he said that he walks around the airport, the grocery store, the wherever, and just moments after people pass him, he hears it in the background, playoffs, playoffs, playoffs. So good luck, Jim Mora, with that. So playoffs, in a way, are here already, though, Steve, in high school sports. So we had conference championships in swimming and wrestling this past week. Steve will talk about Wisconsin Valley Swimming Conference Championships here in just a moment. First, though, we'll go through the wrestling from around the area. These were all conference, end-of-the-year conference tournaments, and then playoffs for wrestling begin next week already. But for the Clover Belt Conference, and it was Neillsville, Granton, Loyal doing a good job over the weekend. They had 3 individual titles. Spencer Columbus had a pair of them, and Cadott won the team title in the Clover Belt with 264 points. Neillsville Greenwood Loyal was third, and Abbotsford Colby was fourth, but wrestlers from around the area that made some noise in the Clover Belt Conference Wrestling Tournament as we go through those. At 113 pounds, champion Ashton Ackman, Spencer Columbus. Drayton Ackman at 120 from Spencer Columbus. And go down the list here just a little bit more. Tommy Fremoth at 160 pounds, NGL. Nathan Buchanan, 182 from NGL. And Gunnar Hoffman at 220 pounds, also from Neillsville, Greenwood, and Loyal. From the Merriwood Conference, or in wrestling terms, as it's known as Stratford. Stratford had 9 individual champions, 3 runners-up, and Stratford on a tear again here in 2019. They won the Merriwood Conference Wrestling Championship with a score of 293. Phillips in second place with 167, so I mean, just not even close. And we look through this other scores here. Auburndale 99 points and Edgar 62 points. So again, Stratford 293, and from first down to last 62 points. So that just kind of explains the whole thing right there, or at least to me it does. At 120 pounds, Noah Altman from Auburndale is Merriwood Conference champion. And Stratford at 113, Logan Galkey. 126, Gavin Drexler. 132, Elijah Lucio. 138, Max Schwabe. 152, Jake Hayden. 160, Devin Denny. 170, Hunter Ford. 182, Trevor Denny. 195, Bo Gross. And there you have it. That's the Merriwood Conference right there, cleaned up again by the Stratford Tigers. In the Wisconsin Valley, we take a look at things from Saturday as well. In the Wisconsin Valley Conference Wrestling Tournament, Wisconsin Rapids is the 2020 Valley Conference champion, 206.5 points. DC Everest, second place at 194. Spash with 169. And Marshfield in fifth place at 144.5. As we take a look through the individual champions, 106 pounds, Preston Spray of Wisconsin Rapids. Justin Groshek from Spash at 113. Cale Roth, Spash 120. Hoyt Blaskowski of Marshfield at 126. Gabe Pugh of Marshfield at 138. Ryan Dolezal from Marshfield at 145. Weiler Lubeck, Wisconsin Rapids, 152. Pete Rucker of Wisconsin Rapids at 182. Remember Pete from football season did a real nice job for Wisconsin Rapids Lincoln. Andrew Schutz, 195. Wisconsin Rapids rounds out local wrestlers from the Wisconsin Valley Conference. Steve, you had a chance, I believe, on Thursday to take in the Wisconsin Valley swim meet. Highlights of that meet available online at Facebook at Zaleski Sports. Steve, what'd you see in swimming on Thursday?
A lot of fun. I mean, it was the first time I've ever been to a swim meet, and it was a lot of fun to go over to Lincoln High School. The Spash Panthers dominating from beginning to end, all led by Drew Harris, the Iowa commit, heading to swim for the Hawkeyes. Won in a handful of events, including the 200-yard individual medley, where he set a record in the conference meet by over 3 seconds. He raced again in the 500-meter freestyle. He won by 16 seconds. Yeah, he was starting to lap people after like the third or fourth lap. So he was absolutely dominant. Spash winning for the first time since 2017. And before first time since 2017, DC Everest had won the previous two. And Spash continues their great dominance in the pool, and a lot of fun. Again, go check out the highlights. If you have never been to a swim meet, head over there. Sectionals are coming up this Saturday in Hudson, and Drew Harris has a very good chance to making it down to state again in his senior year for the Spash Panthers. Yeah, that the event he won by 16 seconds. I think as I was looking at it, you had to check to see if he had flippers on his feet. I mean, he was just zipping through the water. Again, highlights so you can get a visual on this kid are out there on Facebook right now. But man, he like a shark in water. Yeah. Well, and you look at so one pass down the pool is 25 meters, and when they dive into the pool and they come up for the first time, he was about halfway into. When he surfaced for the first time, he was probably 18, 20 meters or yards, and like you said, just a shark, just a dominant performance in the pool by Drew Harris. Yeah, it was good to see. Gave a nice interview after the meet for Steve, and then again, those highlights so you can get a visual of Drew and all the rest of the Wisconsin Valley swimmers on Facebook at Zaleski Sports. All right, Steve, we're going to take a deep dive, speaking of swimming, no pun intended there, just worked out that way, into high school basketball here from around the area. Because I mentioned playoffs, it's coming. 2 weeks. 2 weeks for girls basketball from tomorrow. For the 25th is regional quarterfinals, so it's crazy how fast it's coming up. We've already had one girls conference champion crowned in the area. We'll talk about those girls here in this. This all stems from our girls and basketball Power 5. That is our alphabetical listing of teams in the area that we think you should pay special attention to. This was released prior to the season. It continues still today. There's been some changes on this list, Steve. A couple, though, have remained the entire time. We'll start here with girls basketball. Newman Catholic, Neilsville, Loyal. They've been on the list the entire season. Yeah, and they've been able to continue their winning ways. As you mentioned, we'll get into talking about each team a little bit more individually, but just continuing to dominate. Newman we expected, Neilsville we expected, and Loyal with the athletes that they have the Greyhounds continue to impress as well.
Loyal is on the top of our alphabetical listing in the girls basketball Power 5. They come in with a record of 15-3. They started 2 weeks ago with just 2 losses. They did lose to Neillsville at home, so they were swept by the Warriors in conference. That puts the Greyhounds in trail position in conference. They now have 2 losses to Neillsville's 1, and with just a couple games left, we'll get into Neillsville here in just a moment. It appears as though Loyal will claim the second-place spot in the very competitive Cloverbelt East. They though, compared to Neillsville, will compete in Division 5 in the postseason. So all things considered, all right, you didn't win your conference, but you're the best D5 team in the competitive Cloverbelt East, and that's going to put them in good position come postseason play. We believe that they are a 2 seed in their section.
Yeah, and again, they're one of those teams that got moved. I mean, they're not in with Assumption. Right. They're not in with Newman. They got moved over to the western part of the state, or northwestern part of the state, so they got a very good opportunity to make a deep run into the postseason and see what they can do come March, come late February, and hopefully make a run towards Green Bay.
Yeah, the other teams in their section, we'll just mention a couple, but McDonald Central, Eau Claire Emmanuel, Clayton, Bruce, all those teams, Turtle Lake, you talk about North and Northwest, that's where a lot of those teams, a good chance they'll meet up with a couple of them in the playoffs here this year. For the Greyhounds this week, they've got, let's just say this, they've got 3 regular season games left. Those opponents have a combined record of 12-24, including winless Granton, who they play tomorrow, and then the home finale of the year against Columbus Catholic, and Columbus Catholic without one of the conference's premier players, Addison Byrell, out on injury for the rest of the season. So it looks like the Hounds are in for maybe, the way I'll put it, an easier run than they had during the season. They'll be able to finish a little bit on cruise control. And again, we believe they are the number 2 seed in that section that I mentioned before, which is the Colfax section if you're looking at your brackets at home, and I'm sure you are. Next up in our alphabetical list is Marshfield. The Marshfield Tigers are 12-5. Coach Varsho has her girls on a tear. I believe that Marshfield has won 8 straight wins. They are in first place in the Wisconsin Valley Conference, a half game above Spash, who they split with during the season. So if Marshfield is able to win their next 2 conference games, they both happen this week against Wausau East, winnable game. Wausau West, later in the week, that game will be live at Zaleski Sports. We'll go through our schedule here momentarily, who they beat at West earlier this year. They will claim at least a share, at a minimum, Steve. They get a share of the conference title with wins over East and West this week. And if Spash were to slip, Marshfield could be outright conference champions. We believe Marshfield is somewhere on that 6-7 line, a 6 most likely with the Wisconsin Valley Conference Championship.
It's really unreal what Coach Varsho and those girls have really done this year, especially with the way that they started out the year. Defense is really what obviously wins championships, and the Marshfield Tigers are right there to propel themselves to even a share of a conference title is outstanding with the youth that they have on this team. And got to give your hats off to Coach Varsho, the job that she's done with the players that she has, and getting the job done in a Wisconsin Valley Conference where a lot of people thought Spash would just run away with it. And the Marshfield Tigers are right there, 12-5, as you mentioned, overall, 9-1 in the conference. Just taking a look at what they need to continue to do to make a run and see if they can knock off some of those teams in the postseason. Again,
we believe they win the Valley. They are the 6th seed in their section. They've got 2 non-conference games next week that could perhaps propel them to other things. Neillsville is the Cloverbelt Conference leader. They come in our Power 5 as they've stayed all year at 16-2. And they are a Spencer win and Granton win away from taking the Cloverbelt East Championship. If Loyal were to slip up in any of those 3 remaining games, Neillsville would claim that crown sooner. It would be their first since the 2013-2014 season. That's where they were in a state championship game. That's Jenny Lindner And the rest of the gang were running roughshod over the Clover Belt East way back in 2013, 2014. Doesn't seem like that long ago, but it was 6 years ago already. We think they're the odds on, like we mentioned already, already with essentially a 2-game lead with 3 games to go over Loyal with the sweep over the Greyhounds. And that puts, though, the Warriors at a 3 seed in Division 4 against Steve just because of their section and where they happen to be. But Melrose, Mindoro, Colfax, some of the other teams out in their area will put them as the 3 seed, and that is if they beat Osseo Fairchild in the Clover Belt crossover coming up on February 22nd. If they fall to Osseo Fairchild, then a worse seed than a 3, although all you need to have is a 4 seed in the playoffs. You host a regional final, and then you're on the road anyway.
Yeah, and it's really going to be a good test for them against Osseo in the crossover game. They've, don't want to say cruised through the Clover Belt and cruised past their non-conference games. They had a couple falls earlier to Gilman, and it's just a big test for them. All the Clover Belt crossover games are very good tests, very competitive games, and so we'll see what the Neillsville Warriors can do against Osseo Fairchild. Osseo has been very competitive the last decade. Melrose, Mindoro have a couple of very good athletes over there, and then Colfax has always been good in that sectional as well. So we'll see what Neillsville can do in the next couple weeks. Big test for them, as you mentioned, against a very good Osseo Fairchild game in the Clover Belt crossover game.
Coach Geyer concerned about alliances, all the teams in that Eau Claire Memorial section, not of the Clover Belt East. He'll be voting alone. Mm-hmm. And as we saw during the football season with the Stratford Tigers, sometimes that can that can really be a problem when you're over there voting alone. All right, moving down our list, Newman Catholic, been in it since the beginning. They are Merriwood South champions. They are 16-3 overall. And for the second year in a row, back-to-back Merriwood South champs, they are the 1 seed in the Bowler sectional. I really don't see anything that changes that. And now, I suppose they could slip up and lose to Edgar tomorrow, or maybe Prentice on Friday. I still don't think that changes anything, as those are Division 5 teams, and so are they. But I don't really think that's going to change anything. And it doesn't seem likely that the Newman Cardinals would be in a position to fall to either of those teams. They would come in as the favorite if you were so inclined to pick that in high school sports, which you shouldn't. But if you were, they've already beat Athens and Edgar and Assumption twice. Those are their sectional opponents, so they are the number 1 seed in their Division 5 section.
Yeah, and I just looking at the sectional semi, the Mosen East sectional semi before the sectional final would be in Bowler. Mm-hmm. Just as you mentioned, going through those teams, Edgar has been off and on all year. Newman Catholic is just I haven't seen Prentice in the Merriwood North, but Newman has got to be the favorite going into the postseason in that sectional.
Pacelli Catholic on the list earlier this year, and they were promptly taken off, and now they're back on. And I'll just say this: they are the 5th team in our alphabetical listing. There's probably about 4 other girls' teams that are just a half a tick right behind as we look at Power 5 basketball teams in the area. Pacelli, though, is in first place in the Central Wisconsin South. You cannot deny that. And it is a big week for the 13-7 Pacelli Catholic Cardinals because the Central Wisconsin South Championship will be on the line on Friday. The Wild Rose Wildcats come to town. The Wildcats are 8-0. Cardinals are 9-1, and the Pacelli Catholic Cardinals will need to win that game to claim a share of the conference championship. They did lose to Wild Rose earlier this year, so Pacelli, Steve, on Friday, and you'll be able to call that game. They will either claim or forever remove themselves from this Power 5 here this year.
Yeah, you talked about the big week for Pacelli, obviously, against Wild Rose. The Wildcats as well have Almond Bancroft twice in the next week. Yeah. They have Almond tonight, and then they head to Pacelli on Friday, and then they have Almond again next Monday. So even a slip-up from Wild Rose would be big for the Pacelli Cardinals. They have a home game. They only lost by 3 to Wild Rose the last time they faced each other. And it's fantastic to see a team giving Pacelli a run for their money. I mean, Wild Rose hasn't for the last handful of years that I can remember, hasn't been competitive on the girls' side. And so for them to have a team that can compete with a Pacelli Cardinals team that ran through the conference last year, to be able to have a as you said, essentially a conference championship game on Friday is going to be fantastic at Pacelli High School. It's going to be a fun game to sit and watch and call.
That's right. That's right. All live games available at ZaleskiSports.com. Full schedule coming up a little bit later on in the show. So Pacelli Catholic girls, we believe, with a win against the Wildcats, would claim a 3 seed in the Adams Friendship section. A loss probably drops them quickly, and here's why. Other teams in that section, Auburndale, Colby, Marathon, it's a tough one. Even the Stratford Tigers would be a tough out in that Adams Friendship sectional. So a win for conference bragging rights and a conference championship, important for Pacelli on Friday. Seed implications are probably even more so important there. So that was our girls' Power 5 one more time: Loyal, Marshfield, Neelsville, Newman Catholic, and Pacelli Catholic. Moving on to our boys' basketball Power 5, and on the list all year long, the Auburndale Apaches. They are 16-2, led by Coach Chad Weinfurter. They had their 6-game winning streak snapped at home last Tuesday at the hands of the Edgar Wildcats, 52-47. Edgar also took Auburndale to triple overtime earlier in the season. But Auburndale is going to have a chance to get right, and they did actually on Friday. They whooped up on Prentice to the tune of 82-54, and they play just one game this week, Athens, Thursday on February 13th. And the Wausau East Sectional is where they are, where most of our boys' Power 5 teams are. And we believe the Auburndale Apaches are a 2 seed as of today, but they've got a bunch of games left to be played, including Stratford Tigers later on this year. But Steve, Auburndale 16-2 and look to be a 2 seed right now.
Yeah, as you mentioned, they had a little bit of a anger game against Prentice coming out on Friday and win by 30. I've seen Edgar a couple times this year. They've taken a couple good teams to the final minutes, and as you mentioned, Auburndale right there at 16-2, a very competitive sectional in the Wausau East sectional. So we'll get into that a little bit later on, but Coach Weinfurter will have his boys ready and see what they can do down the stretch as they finish off the season in a couple weeks.
New team in our Power 5. They are new completely this year, are the D.C. Everest Evergreens. The Evergreens are 12-3 and coming off a win against Marshfield on senior night at the Bozen Fieldhouse. And the Evergreens, that game got a little bit chippy. A very competitive game. Marshfield certainly didn't like being stung at home on senior night, and so some frustrations had bubbled over. And especially with Everest, they got up to, I think it was a 27-7 start to that game. And a little bit of trash talking going on. Marshfield players, none too willing to just sit there and take the trash talking and the 27-7 start by the Evergreens, and things got a little bit wild. Two of the, I'll just say this, there were 2 trees brought in by the Marshfield student section. I don't know, I don't think they were evergreen trees. They look more like pine trees to me, but that's a different class that those kids perhaps should attend. Some sort of an arbor class, maybe. But at any rate, they brought in some trees. Well, there wasn't much to talk about with the trees, and so one of the young men from the student section decided he was going to go cause some trouble, and he started to walk that tree over to the other side where the Everest kids were sitting. Fortunately for everybody in the Bozen Fieldhouse, he was headed off by one of the folks there keeping things calm, and told to take his tree back to the other side. I would have told him to take his tree out of the building. But at any rate, Everest won the game 74-50. Like I said, they got off to a big start. They're 7-2. They're first place in the Wisconsin Valley Conference. A half game clear of Spash at 6-2. The Evergreens, though, Steve, are going to be tested this week. It would be a big achievement to stay on this list, and because it would be a big achievement for their team. They play Tuesday at Chippewa Falls. They're 11-4. They play Saturday against sectional companion Hudson at 11-4. Oh, and they play Spash in between on Thursday and essentially what could end up to be a Wisconsin Valley Conference title game. Should they win all three, I believe they're the 2 seed in the Wisconsin Rapids sectional, but all 3 games are going to be tough to win.
Well, absolutely, and that's going to really give you the character of the DC Everest Evergreens. I saw them a couple of weeks ago against Wisconsin Rapids, and they lost by 30. And so that's why I was kind of surprised that I guess I really hadn't been looking at their record until the last couple of days. 12-3 overall, as you mentioned, knocking off a Marshfield team, but this week is, as you mentioned, it going to be huge. Got a very good Chippewa Falls team leading their conference. Have the Splash Panthers on Thursday, and then Hudson's always a tough game to take on. No matter if it's at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, Hudson's always a good team to see where you're at going into the postseason. And the Evergreens are right on track to claim a Wisconsin Valley Conference title, which again is, don't want to say surprising, but they have the athletes, they have the players. As Brian Hollenbeck, the leading scorer on the team, has been fantastic all year, and continues to show why the Evergreens should be right up there at the, as you had mentioned, the number 2 seed in the Wisconsin Rapids sectional. Should be a fantastic run to the end of the year.
As we wrap up the Boys Power 5, as we're running out of time on today's show, and the show just goes too fast. You're listening to the Zaleski Sports Show. Jason Zaleski here alongside Steve Mapes. All right, Edgar, you're in. You're in the Power 5. The Edgar Wildcats are 13-3. 2 of those losses have come to Auburndale and Stratford, and the other loss came to Rib Lake, which was the very first game of the year, and they only lost by 2. Coach Dave Huss has got his guys exactly where he wants them. They've got wins against Neelsville, Auburndale, and Almond Bancroft. Those 3 teams, Steve, just 6 losses amongst them. Half of them came to the Edgar Wildcats, so they are not only deserving of this spot, but it's exactly where Coach Huss and his Edgar Wildcats want to be and have earned their spot here in the conference, in the Merriwood Conference standings. They play now 5 road games in a row, so good luck there. That's always a tough stretch. But we believe one of those road games are against Stratford, who we'll talk about here momentarily coming up. But they go 4-1 in those, which we think is completely possible, and they would be the number 3 seed in that Wausau East sectional along with Auburndale. Moving right down the list, Neelsville 15-2, and they have been on a tear all season long. The 2 losses, though, Steve, for Neelsville, Auburndale, and Edgar. So when you look at sectional seeding, you can't be seated above those 2, that's for sure. Stratford in that Wausau East sectional is the clear number 1. So Neelsville, best as a 4. If they slip up at any point, could be something worse than that. But they do play Spencer on Tuesday. That's tomorrow. The Rockets are 9-1. Warriors are 12-0. But the Rockets only team left on the schedule with a winning record. So Neelsville looks to have things kind of right where they want them, and we believe they are firmly on the 4 line in the Wausau East sectional. And that brings us to the Stratford Tigers. They are 17-0, undefeated. Steve, they even tried to put a Minnesota team against them, and the Spring Grove Lions were turned back 60-39. Stratford is the clear number 1 seed in the Wausau East sectional.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, just going over to that border battle, getting the job done. A little back and forth to begin the game, and then Vaughn Bright and company, Ben Barton and all those guys really got the job done, hitting some big 3-pointers and knocking off the Spring Grove Lions in that Wisconsin-Minnesota border battle, and continuing their undefeated season, as you mentioned, the number 1 seed in the Wausau East section when it comes out in a couple weeks.
Yep, and we believe that to be about as solid as anything can be right now. So again, as we take a look at the Wausau East section, though, boy, Auburndale, Edgar, Neelsville, Spencer, Stratford, Marathon's going to give people a tough run. Pacelli is in that as well. Good luck, man. Just good luck there. That is, and if you're some of those other teams having a really fantastic season, and then you run into those other teams, tough luck sometimes. But that's sports. That's why we do what we do here. And what else we do is we bring you live sports all year long and all week long, again, here on the Zaleski Sports Broadcast Network. It all starts on Tuesday, Marathon at Assumption Girls Basketball. You can also listen live at 1320 AM WFHR. Owen Withy at Columbus Catholic Boys Basketball. In Greenwood at Spencer, we believe that 92.3 WOSQ will join us for that one. Again, all games found live at ZaleskiSports.com. On Thursday, it's Wisconsin Rapids Lincoln at Merrill. Wisconsin Valley boys basketball. Everest and Spash will be keeping an eye on that one. And then it's Stratford at Rib Lake, probably, well, aside from Auburndale, one of Stratford's best chances for a loss, if you want to word it that way. Rib Lake, good team in the Merriwood North, and we'll be there live on Thursday for that. Friday, it's a trio of girls basketball games. We mentioned it already, Wausau West at Marshfield. Marshfield with a chance that night to claim a share of the Wisconsin Valley Conference title. You can also listen live on 1450 AM WDLB. Columbus Catholic at Loyal, and then Wild Rose at Pacelli. We mentioned that one earlier. Steve will be there, and wow, pretty good week.
Yeah, a lot of good games coming up. Especially just looking at Thursday, Stratford having to travel to Rib Lake. It's never easy to be on a bus for that long. Yeah. And we'll see what the Stratford Tiger boys can do. Just a lot of good basketball. Again, only 2 weeks left for girls basketball is unreal to think of before the postseason. And in a couple weeks, then we'll be able to bring you the brackets and the seeding. So that'll be one of the more exciting times of the year. We mentioned it during the football season when the brackets came out, and having it for boys and girls basketball is a lot of fun because every team makes it into the state tournament.
It's a free-for-all at that point. All right, again, all games live found at ZaleskiSports.com. Highlights all week on the Zaleski Sports Facebook network. For Steve Maves, this is Jason Zaleski telling you to have a great weekend. Go Sports!